I know, right? That's when I start to forget my talk. Yeah. Cool. So it sounds like we have video. Thanks for coming, everyone, today. We're going to talk about common sense career transitions, and I'm Celeste Thayer. I am contractually obligated to tell you that my opinions are my own, and that I do not represent Amazon or AWS in any way. So why are we here today? I'm hoping to give you a couple of tools that will help you do things like get a job, feed yourself, maybe buy a home, or whatever it is that you want to do with your money. And I don't know about you, but if I'm stuck with people for 40 or more hours a week, I kind of want to like them. So maybe if they're not going to be your friends, at least find some people that are friendly to you. I'd also like you to learn new skills and improve yourself, and maybe even become a more interesting person. I know I did. We will talk about all of these tools in this slide right here. So the tools that we're going to talk about today include 20 seconds of courage, a framework that I developed for career transitions, and then using your network and learning how to learn. So I bounced around a lot, and I learned to develop a framework for my career decisions, and I started to use it at some point. I worked in restaurants doing various jobs from when I could drive until like my mid-20s. I went to school in parallel, and I had no real plans for my degree. I just sort of farted around. Eventually, I did get serious, and I stopped working in restaurants, and I managed to get myself a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering. It was the late 2000s, and I was in Washington when it was the depths of the recession, so having that degree was pretty useless. So what did I do? I went back to school as a delaying tactic, and I got a Master's of Science in Construction Management, which is super cool if people are hiring construction managers, but again, there were no cranes like there are today. I ended up applying to the only place that was hiring at the time, and that was Amazon. I'd been applying for jobs and not getting them for like 2 years in school, and it was really sucky, but I kind of needed to feed myself and maybe like maintain the rent on my apartment, so I did what I could do. I started as a copywriter in what would later become Amazon Business. That got boring real fast. If any of you are copywriters, no offense. It just wasn't right for me. So I actually stuck with that same team, and I moved into database operations for the catalog databases that run Amazon.com. And that was pretty cool for about 4 years. Eventually, I guess I just grew out of that too. I moved to the enterprise data warehouse, and I did secure storage stuff, like technical program management. And then later I ended up doing security policy work. And then later I moved into AWS infrastructure, where I worked as like cloud migration stuff, I guess. And then I now manage a software team also in AWS infrastructure. So what is 20 seconds of courage? This is our first skill. How did I bounce around so much? I actually use this a ton. Whenever I was not really sure, I used this very simple tool. It does take some real courage to implement it, but you've probably read this quote by now. You can take another second to read it if you haven't. So this tool addresses that feeling. You've probably had it. I know I have. You can raise your hand if you feel like nervous about doing something sometimes. Cool, I do see some hands raised. So how do you deal with that feeling? Personally, I actually take a minute to like really truly feel this fear and just be like, oh shit, this is gonna suck. Then I put on my like pretend dragon slaying helmet and take my pretend sword, and I just do it. So like, as an example, maybe I just do something that is super fast. So I want to learn how to skydive. I never skydived before. It's really scary as an idea. So what do? I put on my hat and take my sword, and I go to their website and sign up for their email list. Cool. All right, so at some point in time, they try to sell me a skydiving package. It's like, okay, cool. 20 seconds later, like I have bought the skydiving package. All right, cool. Eventually that day comes around, and I need to get an Uber or whatever and go there. 20 more seconds to open the door of the car, get in and go. Eventually I have skydived, and it probably took me about a minute of courage over the course of several weeks, and then it's done, and I did it, and I solved for that particular dream. And no one died along the way. It's not actually that hard when you break it up like that. All right, so after applying your 20 seconds of courage skill, and some others that we will talk about to my winding path, this is the framework that I ended up with. At first, I did not make good career decisions. Like, you can tell all that time in restaurants and like spending some time as a writer, like I had no idea what I was doing. Eventually, I organically sort of came to this framework that we will discuss. And what I use when I'm trying to decide what to do with my life, you're welcome to change this or alter it for your own purposes. I ask myself some questions, and your career itself is a pretty big question, right? You'll find different answers than I did, and that's okay. If you read online, a lot of people are like, let's do plus, minus, cons, pros lists. I hate those. I don't do those. I just ask myself a few simple questions, and the first one is always, do I want to be here? Like, am I even happy? And I know that if I'm asking myself that question, it's probably time to move on. Like, there's no doubt at that point. Then I ask myself about some critical details. Like, do I actually enjoy this work? Because, at some time I did, right? So why? What is it that was appealing about that? Like, what can I find in the future that will also make me happy in that same way that this job once did, right? What skills am I using well, and what skills do I want to use more of? Maybe there's something that I only do 10% of my time, but I'd really like to do that 90%, right? What do I think my next step even should be? Like, sometimes what you think is right is not what's right, but like sometimes what you think is right is at least a pointer to something else, right? I also consider all the intangibles, like location, schedule, who my peers are going to be, stuff like that. I take some time after I identify my next step, and if there are any skills that I lack, I take that time to build them, and I suffer through that job until I have some, whatever it is, right, C, whatever. And then I do some work to figure out what the next step is and actually target it. For me, it's not the specific company, but for you, it may be like a certain company. I like Amazon, so I keep sticking there. So for me, it's like, what team should I go to? So taking a step back, how do you break into a field? At first, for a long time, I was taking just any restaurant job that would take me. It's not really like the way you want to go around and do this. Like, if they're going to take you, you kind of have to ask, like, if you know nothing, why are they taking you, right? I did end up moving from like cashier at McDonald's to managing a chain of restaurants, like fast casual sushi in Western Washington. So at least I was making some progress in my career at some point doing that. But I wasn't using any framework, and you can tell kind of how unfocused I was. I ended up actually making the same mistake when I started looking for a job in civil engineering in 2008. I was just looking for anyone who would hire me. No one ever did. Like I said, it was during the depths of the recession, and no one was building the giant buildings that I wanted to build. So I delayed, again, hoping that I could get a job with I don't know, Skanska or Bechtel, some of the names that you probably know, even if you don't know who they are. But at some point in time, I was running out of money, and I needed money. So I actually got paid to get my master's degree. That was the only reason I did it, and I needed some time to figure out where to go next. I unintentionally used some courage when the master's degree ran out and the stipends also ran out to use that 20 seconds of courage and apply to a tech company that I knew was hiring. And I actually interviewed with Amazon twice for 2 different positions. I don't recommend it because at that time we did these horrible 7-hour behavioral and technical interviews that were really exhausting. But I ended up getting my foot in the door, right? And sometimes you just need to suffer through something to get your foot in the door. That is a trick that you can do. I picked the job as a copywriter, honestly, because it had less phone time, and I don't like talking on the phone. That is not a good reason to pick a job, but I did. So I recommend sometimes maybe being a little bit more focused than me. So let's talk about the boring stuff for a second. I did have to have a resume, and I did have to apply to some job description that somehow got me in the door, right? I applied to anything that sounded vaguely doable. Somehow I luckily ended up with a company that I've spent nearly a decade with. I did have a lot of patience and a lot of 20 seconds. Like over the years, I applied to things that were cattle calls or group interviews or a lot of phone screens that went nowhere, a lot of them. I was definitely doing things the hard ways, but we will talk about some tricks to this process. But first, you need to know a few things about job descriptions. I know a lot of women seem to apply to jobs that are only 100% qualified for, and men seem to apply to jobs that they're only 80% qualified for, if you look at the list of bullets. So whoever you are, I don't care. Apply when you are most of the way there. It's fine. You're probably not going to get a call back anyway, so be patient and just keep trying. You're also welcome to look for something that's a bit of a stretch. If you are pretty good for most things, cool, try it. You might actually get your foot in the door. And then keep looking at different job descriptions. Figure out how to tailor your resume to the job description and the wording that they have. It means you'll have to do a million resumes with slightly different keywords so that you appeal to different recruiters and different hiring managers. It's okay, you just need to get your foot in the door. Keep applying even when you are sick of it. And keep your resume short. As a hiring manager, I've seen 3 and 5 page resumes, and it's just I don't care. Sorry. It's 1 page is enough. Put some skills at the top, put 1 to 3 jobs at the bottom, and you'll have enough information for me to know if I need to call you, right? I know we have at least 1 ex-military person in here, so I will add in this little caveat. Ex-military resumes are like gibberish to me. There's a lot of acronyms that I don't understand. And so if you are ex-military, I recommend applying to jobs that are for warriors or for veterans or whatever keyword that people are using to apply to you. And then you can sort of work and figure out eventually what acronyms to avoid and what words to use. You can just sort of calibrate yourself, right? So it is important to iterate on your framework. Once I sort of had an informal one, I kept iterating over the years. I've tried a lot of things. At one point, I knew I couldn't decide where to go within Amazon. I knew I still wanted to stay there, and I wanted to be in tech officially, because I did that database operations thing for a lot less pay than normal and without a cool title. I know personally that I'm as much of a badge collector. I like the recognition for things a lot of times as much as money. I still did need to, live somewhere. And I had some other goals like buying a house, and I wasn't going to achieve those goals with that database operations job. So at the time, I talked to over 20 different hiring managers. I bought a lot of coffee, and I asked a lot of people who told me no thanks to actually introduce me to someone else who might be looking for someone with my skills. So even if it doesn't work out, you can be persistent and be open to other experiences and just ask. Use that 20 seconds of courage to be hey, someone will want me, right? Ironically, with those 20 people, the first person I spoke to had the best offer for me, and that's the one I ended up taking. What I didn't realize until later is that he was just the most desperate. And however, it had taken me so long to do these 20 different interviews that I avoided one of the worst outages their team has ever had in years, and 50% of the team left by the time I joined. So, cool. At least I got the sweet title, and I was paid more, pretty hefty raise actually, and I ended up buying a condo, so that goal checked. At some point though, with that job, I still had to ask myself the same questions. Should I stay or should I go? What details about this are important to me? How do I work my network to get to a better position? And I hunted until I found the best match. Someone gave me the best answers to my questions, right? So that experience of talking to 20 different people showed me 2 things. And one is that your network is valuable. So if you don't have a very broad one, consider working on it. Maybe sometimes if you delay long enough, you can avoid some bad things. I don't know if that's really a lesson forever, but it works at that point. So cool. After that change, I was actually officially in tech. Sweet. I learned a lot. I got a lot of new skills. I put some new tools in my toolbox, some of which we're talking about today. a lot about deprecating legacy software and dealing with difficult personalities too. I use my 20 seconds of courage a lot for that as well. You'll be glad to hear that I never actually wrote my own resume ever again after that one. I do keep my LinkedIn weirdly up to date, like moment to moment sometimes, but that's just me. So eventually at some point I was also dissatisfied with that gig and I had to use this framework again. So by now we know when you recognize that framework or that question, do I want to leave, like am I happy still? It's time to get out. I knew at that point in time that I really liked being with internal systems because it's a little bit easier for me to talk to Amazonians than real customers. And there are just some standards of behavior and methods of negotiating that we have in our peculiar culture, and I was comfortable with those. I'm a little bit lazy that way. So I had also further developed my network. It was even more broad, and I decided to ask around again. So I rinsed and repeated, right? So maybe at this point in time, you're wondering, like, how does one develop a network and how do you use it? So I think by now that using your network is as easy as asking, but asking can be scary. So one tactic I use a lot is putting the Band-Aid on first for me. And what you do is just you ask something. You're like, hey, I'd really like to get coffee with you. It's totally okay if you're too busy for this, but I want to pick your brain on CISSP certifications. Will you spend some time with me and talk about it? And because you've sort of given people an out, if they're actually busy, you know, no offense, they're busy, whatever. But I found that most people actually are like, cool, you know, they care about me too, so I might as well accept. You can also take something like, I understand that you're busy, but maybe you could take some time to walk me through systems design interviews and maybe even do a mock one with me. Again, you've given them an out. So feel free to like steal my wording and use it. There are a ton of online resources as well for how to manage life if you have different personality types, so like introverted or extroverted. You can look at those, but we'll also Google it later, but we'll also talk about these a bit here. Just embrace your personality type. Like, you are your own unique human and it is not a problem. So eventually, if you recognize that, you will find the right place for you. If you don't though, if you try to fit or force something on you that is not you, it will be awkward and it will be painful and you will end up in a place where you're not happy because you are not being your authentic person. So why make it harder for yourself? Like, why torture yourself, right? So if you're an extrovert, honestly, extroverts have it easy. There's a ton of information out there that already just sort of assumes you are extroverted and you're able to talk to anyone. One tip that you can use if you're an extrovert, but things don't seem to be working out for you when dealing with some other human being, is just to ask them questions. Like, people love talking about themselves, right? Be genuinely interested and let the conversation flow by sort of just gently picking at their assumptions, saying, hey, you know, can you tell me more? That's really interesting. What about it? You know, stuff like that. Even like what worked for them, how they feel about it, things like that. Other ways you can develop your network without one-on-one time with someone is to do things like conference presentations, go to parties, go to like any size meetup, big or small. I go to a lot of meetups where I plan to either give a talk or meet 3 new people that day or volunteer to hand out swag or whatever. I always have a goal for the engagement. And once I get my goal done, like, I can leave, I'm cool. Or, you know, if I'm having fun, like, I can stay. If you're an introvert, there's a lot less information, although there is plenty of information online. It's a little bit harder for you guys. There's not a lot of advice out there. You can do some things like open source or creating educational videos about whatever you're passionate about, even if it's not technology. Or you can purposely find the very small meetups. There are some that reliably have about 2 people, and like, those might be easier for you. Another thing that you can do is bring a friend and have them be like, not really your wingman, but like, you know, someone who you know and trust and who can take you out of a situation if you need to. And talking about margaritas earlier, I'm not really recommending using substances in order to get yourself a job, but having a glass of something, beer or wine, whatever, before you go out, and time it so that you're a little bit tipsy when you arrive at the thing, that often helps. I mean, it's called liquid courage for a reason, right? So, experiment, find out what works for you, read up online maybe for some new ideas, and don't worry about arriving to some event and leaving after you talk to one person. Whatever you do, don't be too hard on yourself. There's always another thing that you can go to. You've used your 20 seconds of courage, you've met your goal, you're good. So I actually consider myself an ambivert. I don't like huge conferences, although I often make myself go. And I really hate house parties and clubs, which are often extroverted places to hang out. I just say, choose your own adventure. I sometimes feel like meeting 100 people at the OWASP table at DEF CON, and sometimes I just don't. So I try to figure out over time what my feelings are around things, pay attention to those, and then, honor that. I do make those goals and set myself to them, or stick to them, but I don't push myself to do anything that sounds too scary. I'm sorry, too horrid. I will do things that sound scary. Sometimes that's personal development stuff. Scary is not always deadly, but I also give myself a break afterwards. Even if you think you're not an ambivert, I still recommend experimenting and figuring out what works for you. Do what you can. All right, so to get to my most recent job, I used the same framework that we talked about in that last slide about that, but I tried a little bit more experimentation and a lot less networking this time. I only interviewed 4 teams. One of them was sort of looking back at writing and seeing if I could still do that. I spoke to the people that write public blog posts for AWS, and they were perfectly lovely people, and I never would have made it there. I would have killed myself because I was bored. The pace was just not right for me, but again, they're lovely people. I'm not knocking them. I did consider smaller program management goals, but the supporting one Redshift cluster didn't really do it for me either. I even asked somebody just to promote me to people manager, and they told me no. But it didn't hurt to ask. So I ended up moving to a team where I knew people in multiple levels of leadership, and I respected them all. They also had a very broad impact, AWS infrastructure touches every server in the company, so that's pretty cool. And I wanted to take some time to prove that even though I was an individual contributor, I could manage people, and I could spend some time at this place and do that. I did remind people constantly that I had great experiences in management from my restaurant days, just to sort of seed that in their minds. So don't be afraid to talk yourself up. Even if that feels a little bit scary, again, you can use your 20 seconds of courage and say, hey, I'm so great at this. Maybe not exactly those words. I did meet my goals of moving from an individual contributor to a people manager in under 18 months. And knowing what I know now from my framework, I was pretty decisive. I moved to where I could grow and be successful on metrics that mattered for me. And I also saved a ton of money on coffee this time. So this is sort of a meta skill. Learning how to learn is really important. I know you're probably busy people, but I recommend focusing some of your time in this area because you get exponential gains as you practice getting better at learning. There is an excellent free online course, massive open online course, or MOOC, on Coursera. So it's pretty quick. I recommend checking it out later. You'll learn better and more easily. And you may find that you'll get immediate benefits from learning faster, or solidifying certain skills, or even having a better memory. So here are a few of my favorite learning hacks. The best one, in my opinion, is actually directed practice with someone who can give you feedback immediately. It works for just about any skill, but knowing what you're doing wrong right away helps you iterate faster and learn better. Sometimes this means working with someone who's better at a target skill than you, or asking your friends to give you feedback on your presentation, or sometimes paying a professional teacher to just teach you. It can be a lot of different things. If you don't like talking to people, you can even just videotape yourself doing something and see where it looks odd or awkward or hard. That doesn't work for all skills, but looking at yourself with a critical eye can help. It also helps to know how your brain like forms memories and chunks information. It means you need to take breaks in between practice sessions and actually sleep on it to settle a skill in your mind. So like the example of cramming the night before an exam, I don't know if you've done that, but I have, and it was not good for me. Frequent, even small, like 5-minute sessions of practice a day will help you learn a skill better, not faster this time, but better, and less effort overall. You can also learn some tricks for memorization. One of these is the memory palace, where you imagine a place that's really familiar to you, and you put like a different item from your grocery list in each room, and you take the same path through your list every time. So when you're going to the grocery store, you've got 10 items on your list, there's 10 rooms in your house, or 10 locations in your office, or whatever. It makes it easier to remember a sequence of things. It also works when you have a high severity issue and you are woken up out of sleep and you have an SOP in your memory palace for exactly what things that you need to do and which commands you need to use at what time. Because again, there's that path, there's an ordered path, right? So if you're better at learning, you can improve your own skills and improve your own processes, maybe meet some people, and keep a store of information to hand. You may be able to make your life easier or make better decisions. And like I hinted at the beginning, you may even become a more interesting person. I think I did. So that's it. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. It was really nice sharing with you guys today. Does anyone have any questions? I'm happy to answer anything. I see some head shakes. Cool. If you don't want to talk in front of a video, you're welcome to reach out to me one-on-one later.